Well, hey, everybody, welcome to Locker Room. This is Southland's podcast for men where we demons conversations, talk about the right things in the right ways. My name is Scott Atfield. Thanks for checking out the podcast. This podcast is all about creating a culture of strong, godly men in our church that fight for the most important things. And so we are in the back end of season 14, and we're wrapping up with this series I love. It's called Southland Men. And what I want to do over 4 weeks is to tell some really great stories of men in our church, not people on staff, not elders, people in our church that are in the battle, recovering ground, walking new, taking big, courageous steps, fighting for the most important things, living on purpose. And I've got 4 great stories that I'm really pumped to get to share with you. These are men that are part of our 5 campuses. It's going to be a lot of fun. And so my guest today is Brian Ray. How you doing, brother?
I'm great, man.
Good to have you, man. Thanks for coming. It's snowing outside today. We got NTI work today. This will come out in 3 weeks, but we've had a bunch of snow over the last little bit. So I'm encouraged about our time together. I'm glad that you guys made it. Glad that you made it here, and Zach's here with us as well. But I wanted to start off just by giving us a chance to get to know you. There's 5 campuses, and everybody gets to know everybody. And so tell us a little bit about your family, how long you've been married, your children, how their ages, names, all of that stuff.
Oh, awesome, man. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, it's really cool to be able to be here, to just be behind the mic. You know, I've gotten a chance to be encouraged by so many of the episodes in the podcast that we've had in the past. And, you know, a lot of people are touched by it. So I just think, you know, your faithfulness and obedience to come in and sit down and have great conversation. And you are a great conversationalist. So
well, thanks, buddy.
So we'll have all kinds of fun things to talk about. No, so marriage, just such an awesome thing. Mm-hmm. I have been married for 19 years. My wife and I, we've got 3 different things that we celebrate. We celebrate our first date anniversary, which is January 25th. Our engagement anniversary, which will be the 24th of this month. Oh, cool. And then obviously our wedding anniversary. Yeah. So we have 3. So I'm going to tell just a little bit of a story here, okay? Yeah. So I had an opportunity to play high school football. Yep. It was a great time in my life. From that, I had an opportunity to play some college ball. Yep. That was a great opportunity in my life. But I was never a champion in any of those. So I get to go to LCA, which we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Yeah. But I got to go to LCA in 2008, beginning of that school year, and got to work with a football program and with all athletics. But football had been to the semifinals the year before. 2007, they had actually been to I think they'd been to the state championship. It's one of the 2 things. They'd either been to the semifinals year before or the state championship. They didn't win. Okay. So my first year, we made it back to the semifinals. My second year, which is after my first full off season with football, we ended up winning the state championship.
How about that?
It was amazing. It was so good. Awesome. And so many great memories. So fast forward to 2000, and I'm wanting to say it may have been 14 or 15. Okay. I had 2 of my former students who were engaged to be married had reached out to me and said, Coach Ray, would you be interested in doing our wedding? We want you to do it.
I love that, man.
So I'm like, yes, I would love to, but I don't know how that works. So get on the phone, call some people here, and there's this endorsement thing that you have to do. Right. So I got an endorsement for that particular event. Sure. And I get to do it. It's been tremendous. It was fun. So I'm standing up there in front of these people, and the young groom was one of my football guys that won that championship. So I take off this little guy right here, and I'm holding it up and say, look, like I have a championship ring, but this is the all-time world championship ring that I'm going to have. And I have it every day. And I've got a little silicone band that I wear
when I'm lifting. If you're not watching, then it's his wedding ring.
Yeah, it's my wedding ring. So I took so long in the journey to get to the place where I get to be called husband, and I get to wear this with just great pride and gratitude and just really accomplishment. I don't know how else to say it. Yeah. My bride is truly just one of the most amazing human beings that I've ever known. And I know a lot of people. She loves Jesus. She loves me. She loves our children. She is so patient. She's so kind. When I talk to young men, I talk about important characteristics of women. she loves ribeye. And she loves to cook medium, and
Nice.
I thought, well, that's a win.
That's right.
She loves the barbell. She loves to strength train. It's like, well, that's awesome. We have conservative viewpoints, and she's definitely conservative. And I thought, well, that's a win. And then she likes it cold in her house.
Oh, buddy.
So, man, we don't.
Especially as a big fella.
No, that's exactly it. So we have. I watched my grandparents battle over the thermostat for 40 years.
Yeah,
and that's just not one of the battles we have, man.
That's
so
beautiful, man.
I hit. I mean,
you've hit the lottery.
No, I have, buddy. I have with women. So and she's from here. She grew up here at Southland.
Cool.
And, I'm just grateful. I really do. So I will tell her from time to time, it's like, I go, hey, guess what?
Yeah.
She's like, what? So she knows something corny dad jokes going to come up.
Sure.
I woke up again as your husband, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I get to do it again today.
Yeah.
And, but I sincerely mean that. It's just
It's little things like that just remind.
Yeah. Reminds her, reminds me.
Yeah.
So out of that, we dated for 4 years.
Okay.
We were married for 4 years before the Lord blessed us with children.
Gotcha.
Whole child thing too is kind of funny. I had a colleague that was actually doing strength and conditioning with me at LCA, and he had asked me, like in our third year of marriage, he goes, "Hey, when y'all having kids?"
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I don't know, sometime. I mean, we're only 3 years into it. I'm only 30. I mean,
Right,
it's like,
plenty of time.
he goes, bro, like my wife and I have just had a long road with that.
Yeah, problems. Getting pregnant.
It just doesn't happen like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my goodness, it doesn't happen like that. So we, my wife and I just said, okay, so maybe it's time that we start working toward that. And it just happened for us. It just happened quickly, and it happened in 2009.
Okay.
I thought I was ready for that, and so
that's the biggest understatement of the podcast.
No, it is. Just mark that one, right? But Kristen told me, and I had no reaction, and then I proceeded for the next 2 days to not talk to her.
Yeah.
So she called.
Just overwhelmed?
I guess. I think that's probably that's kind of the kind way to say it.
Yeah.
So I've got a best bud, man. His name's Kyle, and he used to live here. And Kristen called Kyle and said, "Hey, I need you to call Brian.
Check on him. Check on that man.
He has got something going on here." So he called and spoke some real plain English to me, and I got myself together. But we had Eliza Jane.
Yeah.
And I don't want to jump ahead too much, but we're Hispanic. I have that is my ethnic heritage and background. Yep. So I call her my little firstborn Mexican. I mean, she's just this little awesome beauty. But we had her in 2010. Okay. We had Lucy in 2012, and then we have
my daughters know her very well.
Yep. And then we have Samson, who's he was born in 2014. Okay. So 2 girls and a boy. 2014. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they're 14, 12, and 10.
Yes, they're
right?
Yep. And then everybody's got a birthday coming up, so they're going to be 15, 13, and 11.
You nailed it, man. Yeah. 2 years apart. How about that?
No, just like I said,
it doesn't happen that way
it doesn't always. It doesn't always.
Vocationally, what do you do?
Well, I'm a realtor.
You do a number of things.
A number of things. Yep. I'm a realtor. Okay. That's what I get to do. It's just this amazing mission field that I could talk about all day. Yeah. I work primarily, almost like statistically, probably 95% of the people that I've had in the last 4 years and the clients that we've gotten to work with have been former students.
Gotcha. Cool.
So, awesome, and we'll talk about LCA as we come. I do some property management. Okay. And that's been interesting. It's been good, but once again with people that we know, and that's made the stewardship of it just a little bit different. I guess I don't want to say more intentional because I wouldn't do it any other way. But it's been really cool to be able to do that and have that opportunity. And then I do chaplain work, which I know we'll talk about at some point. Yeah. I also strength coach just a little bit. Okay. So that's what I did for 25 years. That's professionally, that's really all I've ever done is coach in the strength and conditioning world.
Love it, man.
And COVID changed that quite a bit. So I have one client who I've had for, I think we're into our 18th year.
LeBron James.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. LeBron James. So it's been really fun. So those are the primary ways in which the Lord has given us opportunity to make money.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Just opportunities to build relationships too, and live on mission.
Yeah.
This one's called Man on Purpose. I called that because of you. Your life is very purposeful, and so as we get into this, and real quick, this is not in our notes, but I don't know if you're going to remember this, but it wasn't that long ago. It was last year, end of the year, sometime last semester. Sunday morning, church, Lexington campus. I went in the restroom. You and your son came in the restroom. We're all at the urinals, and I don't know what Samson did, but you're having a dad talk with him, and you're being very intentional. And I just looked over to you because I don't even know what you were saying, but I know what a dad talk is, and I said, hey man, intentional dads never clock out.
Yeah,
and you're like, yeah. Anyway, I don't know if you remember that.
No,
but never clock out is. I don't know what I'm going to use that for. But when I left, I thought I'm writing that down. But that's the origins of it. Standing near you at the urinal as you're talking to your son.
There's magic that happens in the men's restroom.
Right. That's right. But man, I've gotten to witness you serve. I've heard about you serving. There's so many people that we have in common that I know that you've impacted. I've watched you from a distance with your wife and your kids. Even locker room. Listen, even as I asked him that question about his wife. Listen, if you can capture just his heart for his wife and his kids, you hear that in his voice. He's not trying to kiss up. It's just he loves his family, and so you'll capture that throughout this podcast. But I also know I've heard that you had a rough upbringing, and we met together, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, or something like that, just to learn a little bit more about that. But if we do anything today, I'd love for us to talk about, and even if we may not be able to hit deep dives on all of these, but your story growing up, you've got a rough upbringing, and God's just done some cool healing in your life. I don't see the shrapnel of it, meaning God's done some healing in you, and so we're all in recovery, all still growing, but that's a big piece. And then the next piece is when you grow up in a rough family, you don't always have the best family, and you really have worked hard to make sure that what happens at home, it really matters, and you're really intentional with your wife and with your 3 kids. And then another piece is making disciples and mentoring people. There's so much stigma around that people go, I could never do that. And it's like, no, you absolutely can. And so I want to talk about that. So that's where we're going to go. All right. So hopefully we'll try to cover what we can, and we'll figure it out. But if you don't mind, start us by just talking a little bit about your family growing up. What was it like for you? Yeah. Some of your story.
Well, and we talked a little bit before we got on. We hit record.
Yeah.
The spiritual warfare that has been going on in my mind and in my heart.
Yeah.
Once I got a little bit of the notes here, and we're taking a look at it. It's interesting how the word rough upbringing just sparked some things for me. So
it's a nice way to say it.
No, yeah. So I've literally called 3 of my high school buddies. One who probably has a similar story to mine, like similar circumstances, except his was just so, like, I felt like it was just more harsh and more. So the disclaimer I want to say, and this has been what I've been battling. I can sum it up by saying I am a victor through Jesus.
Yep.
I am not a victim of the enemy.
Yeah.
I'm just not. My mom and my dad and even my stepdad, they all did the very, very best they could.
Sure.
So when I look back at the circumstances, and I just as the reality of it is my mom was married and divorced 3 times. My dad was married and divorced 5 times.
So 8 marriages.
So there were 8 marriages, yeah. So my mom's first marriage, which was to my dad, my mom was my dad's second marriage. My mom's second marriage, which was my stepdad.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that I would say like that like affected me. Like that's where I was in the throes of.
Yeah.
My mom just wanted to be a mom. She wanted to be a wife. She wanted, I think, all the things that anybody wants. The same things that I want.
Yeah.
My dad was an alcoholic. And, I think he was loved, but he was also the youngest, and he had a lot of things in his past, and some of the things that I know, some of the things I don't know, but he was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Man, that messes up plans pretty quickly. My stepdad just had such a rough upbringing. I mean, it was tragic. We actually went to Louisiana. That's where he was from, and we went down to Louisiana to spend time with his family and his cousins, and this is when I was like in 5th grade or 6th grade.
Yeah.
And just some of the abuse that he sustained. It's just interesting to think just what kind of rough time this was for in that part of the country.
Right.
He had skipped school at some point, and he was a ruffian, but he didn't have his dad around.
Sure. And
his mom, he basically got caught skipping school, I think is what it was.
Yeah.
The local sheriff called and said, "Hey, we've got your son." She goes, "Well,
this is your stepdad."
This is my stepdad. I said, "Just put him in jail."
That's what she said.
Yeah, that's what she said. So I don't think they had the luxury in this little small town in Louisiana for a juvenile detention center. They just put.
Yeah.
So he spent a night in jail when he was like 9.
Oh my gosh.
So he always kind of thought, well, I'm being easy on you compared to what I had. And, the kids weren't allowed to eat at the table. They had to eat out on the porch. I mean, just all this stuff that to me, once again, just comparing and contrasting, well, I didn't have it bad compared to what they had.
Sure.
So here's the tension. Here's the whole debate. If you're listening today, I have been brutally honest about my circumstances. Mm-hmm. I've been brutally honest about just some of the things that I was kind of caught in the middle of.
Sure.
So I'm not in denial. I've just come to terms with it.
Sure.
Come to peace with it.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk bad about my mom.
Right.
I don't necessarily want to talk bad about my dad or my stepdad.
Sure.
Because there's a source for everybody's stuff, right? There's a source. I don't want it to sound like my grandparents did a bad job with my mom. You know what I'm saying? I don't want any of that stuff. So I want to make sure that I'm very, very clear about that.
Sure.
My circumstances are different than like my children. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll never know.
They'll never know.
I look at my kids and go, "You'll never know."
Yeah. And that's
thank God.
Yeah. Thank God. Right.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I look at a lot of it with my mom. I look at all of it, I think, through a lens of compassion.
Mm-hmm. You didn't always look that way. You look that way now?
I think it took me a while.
Sure.
It was more of a.
It's hard to understand when all this is happening to you.
But that's it.
Abuse, anger, harshness. I mean, all of that. Yeah.
I
Neglect,
think so,
whatever.
But Scott, I think the other thing is like, first of all, I'd say I was never without love.
Correct.
So my dad, even though he had issues with alcohol, man, he was. I mean, my wife asked me this, like, where did you get your capacity to be kind and to love people? Mm-hmm. Like, well, that's all I ever saw my dad do when he was sober. Mm. Alcohol didn't allow him to love himself. It didn't allow him to love my mom. Yeah. There were times where it didn't allow him to just be maybe a lot of the things that I wish he would have been.
Right.
But my dad would hug me. He would love me, especially when he was in a good state of mind. Mm-hmm. He had a temper too, which is funny. I didn't realize that. Now I'm talking about God's protection with a lot of stuff too here. Yeah. I can look back and think about like when he was sober. I can remember him. Maybe there were some times where he would get a little out of sorts or get angry or upset. But I think I just have such a limited capacity to remember those things and a lot of things, quite honestly. There's some things I will remember and never forget. But I remember we were on a road trip to go visit his sister and brother out in Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And I was 19. So I was an all-night thing. You leave at 8 o'clock, you get there 8 o'clock in the morning kind of thing. And I don't know what I did. But man, he got all hot with me all of a sudden, and I'm a grown man. My dad, bless his heart. So we'll get into the adoption thing in just a second. But my dad's 5'8", like 140,
And I know you can't see
Yeah.
unless you're watching.
Yeah.
Give us your specs.
Okay, so specs are 6'2", about 245.
You're every bit of. I'm 6'2". You're probably a little bit taller than me.
But it's So I'm built different, and my dad and my mom both are these little tiny white people. I mean, I'll get to that story in a second. I really will. But I remember my dad just getting all hot on me and just oh man, and I was like, bro, you don't get to say that to me.
Yeah.
I'm a grown dude here. You know, you're frustrated with something. Just say it to me. You don't get to react like that. And then that was a good, honest conversation, and it all de-escalated. Yeah. But I think too, even with my mom, you know, my mom had such an interesting role, Scott. She had to play both. Yeah. Because my stepdad was a truck driver, so he was gone all during the week.
Mom and dad.
So it was, it's impossible.
The good cop and the bad cop.
Dude,
the nurturer and the disciplinarian.
All of it. All of it. And I think a lot, so she, once again, did the best she could. So, and I've talked this to death the last week and a half. You don't know what you don't know. So for me to just say, it's hard for me to say my childhood was awful, or it was rough, or it was the worst. I don't, that's not in my, that's nowhere in my heart.
Yeah.
It is, my circumstances were challenging. Mm-hmm. They're so different than my children. Yeah. I was never without love. So another little side note, you know, we had a foster kid. We'll talk about that also. Mm-hmm. Jamari had it rough. Mm-hmm. Jamari was abused. He was mistreated. Yeah. He was starved. Yeah. He was probably without hope. Now, he couldn't articulate any of that because he didn't know any different. Yeah. I didn't know any different. It's just like, yeah. So anyways.
Your adoption. Talk about that.
Yeah. So, man.
From Texas, right?
Yeah, from Texas. So mom and dad. And now I'll refer to my mom and dad as the folks that adopted me. That's the only family that I have. Yep. I will refer to the biological parents as the biological parents.
Yeah, gotcha.
So biological parents, as I understand it. So this is my mom. My mom had told me this story from day one. Mm-hmm. Like I don't remember a time when she didn't say this. Okay. So she would say, you're adopted, and that you were special because of that, because God placed you with us.
You had a plan.
Yeah. So biologicals were teenagers. Mm-hmm. They got pregnant with me, and at that time, maybe it was just a thing to give it up for adoption. They're Hispanic, so my biological mother was full-blooded Hispanic, full-blooded Mexican. Mm-hmm. Biological father, I'm assuming just from the fact that he was half and half. He was half Caucasian. He was half Hispanic. Yeah. Maybe a first-generation American. Yeah. So I was born in a little border town in Pharr, Texas. So literally Pharr, Texas.
Pharr.
Yeah, Texas. So it's a little, it's close to McAllen. McAllen would be the biggest town. Okay. I know some folks that have some relatives in Pharr, and it's a blip on the map. I mean, you blink and you're going to go right past it. So they had me in, I was born in August of 74. So I just turned 50, which is just, I welcome 50 in like crazy. I love it, man.
It's good, man.
Just bring it. Just bring it.
It's good.
So my mom and my dad had gotten pregnant, and they got married. They got pregnant with a little boy named Jonathan.
Okay.
Jonathan, my dad told me this story at some point after my mom had died. It's really interesting how you just learn, the details of things that you don't really ever think to ask until, things have changed, or someone dies for that matter. But apparently the umbilical cord had been wrapped around his neck. And at that time,
before they had you?
Yeah, this is before they had me. So this would have been in February of 73. Yeah. He lived 2 days and died. So that mom had him in the Garrett County Memorial Hospital, where, technology and whatever else just wasn't
that good.
Yeah. And so that, I think mom had told me at one point that they had tried to have kids again. Mm-hmm. They couldn't get pregnant. So there was a couple that lived in Stanford, Kentucky, which is the 4 miles from our county seat, which is Lancaster.
Sure.
And it's pronounced Lancaster. Anybody knows?
That's right.
It's not Lancaster.
Say it right.
Yeah,
That's
if you're from out of town, you call it Lancaster.
Right.
Or from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But they had adopted a little girl, and Tiffany was like, I want to say she was 3 or 4 years older than me.
Yeah.
And then they were in the process of adopting again. Okay. So this is just freaky, crazy stuff. So they adopted a little girl named Tara. Okay. Tara and I have the same birthday. We're the same nationality. We were adopted through the same agency. And we don't really know, and I don't know all the facts, if she was in the same facility that I was in. We had looked into it a little bit, but what are the chances of two people being born in the same area from ending up 4 miles from each other? Correct. And didn't really even know it? So then we thought, well, are we related? We somehow, but no, that wasn't the case. But anyways, so I always like to say it like this. Once again, little tiny white people, my mom and my dad, brought this big dark-skinned baby from South Texas to Lancaster, Kentucky, 10 years post-integration. So integration happened in 1964, and our schools, so we had 5 or 6 little small schools. They'd started building a county school by that time. I think Garrett County High School opened up in 1964. So all these kids from all these different little county schools that were K through 12 all started going together, including an all-black school called the Mason School, where and there was already some integration already going on. But my Wednesday night Bible school teacher, J.K. Simpson, bless his heart, man, just lost him recently. He passed away. But J.K. used to tell us those stories about when all the kids came together. And he said, man, we all got along. I mean, everybody just kind of had their own pockets and their own interests and the own things that they did. But there wasn't that ugliness. So basically, my mom and dad brought me back to Mayberry.
Yeah.
Now, what's really interesting about my family, our ancestor, who was Hezekiah MacRae, M-C-R-A-E, came from Scotland. So this would be late 1700s. Came from Scotland to Virginia. Yeah. From Virginia, he came to Garrett County, Kentucky, which is the county that Lancaster is in. And he set up shop in 1793, which is 1 year after Kentucky entered the Union. Sure. And we've been in that same area for 200 plus years.
Has,
yeah. So with that, like everybody, like I feel like I'm related to everybody because you've had a chance to intermarry with every of their family in the county. So oddly enough, and this is also a fun story. So we had lived out in Oklahoma for a little bit. At a U.S. history class, and we get to do our family tree. So I'm excited. I'm really excited about this. Yeah. So I remember it was an orange background because that's the only color card, poster board we had, and we only had yellow. We only had yellow construction paper. So what I made looked like a lemon, but it was really supposed to be a football. So I just had these little footballs up. Yeah. So then I start mapping it out, and it starts high and we come down, then it splits. Yeah. And then it comes down, and then it comes back together. And it hit me like 7th grade. It's like, oh my goodness. I do nothing but talk about how I'm from Kentucky. Yeah. And have for 6 years. Mm-hmm. Now I've got to go back with my family tree and show where it comes together at the bottom, which is just typical hillbilly joke, right? Sure. My mom and dad were like 6th or 7th cousins. Is that right? Yeah. So my dad was a Ray. My mom was a Ray. So it was, but once again, we were there. Those were 2 of probably 4, 5, 6 sets of Rays that were in Lancaster, Garrett County at the time. Yeah. So it was just crazy. And I'll get to this some point too in this conversation, but I'm going over this with my oldest daughter.
Oh, cool.
And so she's just kind of where we're from, and she's like, "Dad, our family tree comes together." I'm like, I know it does. It just
insert all the Kentucky jokes.
That's exactly it. So Lancaster, growing up, big family. Like I said, like my dad's brother, who was just this amazing gap fill for my dad when I was, from the time that I was born until we moved away to go to Oklahoma. Yeah. He was just this amazing role model. He was just, passed away from a sudden heart attack. Heart disease is something that ran in my dad's family. And consequently, it was on this. We got married on the anniversary of his passing, which I didn't know.
Sure.
I didn't, it was off my radar. And his wife, so my aunt, had showed up, and she had shared that with us at some point after the fact. So that kind of has a cool time because I've just got great memories of him. Those are like happy memories. Right. But with all that being said, we had family reunions. We had just great amounts of love. Mm-hmm. And, I think about, gosh, when we moved, so my grandparents lived down in northern Garrett County. They had 22 acres that was adjacent to another 100 acres that my papaw's sister owned. Mm-hmm. So I had 122 acres of ripping and running when I was from one till we moved away, and it was just this. It was great, and so a lot of my dad's nonsense was shielded because I had my grandparents, my mom's mom and dad, my grand and papaw, who lived right across the holler. Yeah. And I love spending the night there, going back, talking about my uncle. His name was Uncle Vonnie. I'm not even going to get into their names. They had some crazy names. My grandmother must have been some bad pain when she was having to name these kids. But Uncle Vonnie, I remember spending the night with him, and he would take me to he worked at Cowden's up here in Lexington, which was a clothing company. They made denim jeans and jackets and bibbed overalls. And, he would come home from Lexington, and I'd go and spend the night with him and my Aunt Shirley. And, every time he'd get home, I can remember how he smelled. Isn't that just so interesting, just the memories? Sure. But he was also a safe place. Yeah. He was like you said, refuge. Yeah. Yeah. So he would take me to Long John Silver's. Where I got fish and chips and extra hush puppies and a Sprite. And then we'd go to Rose's. And the amount of Star Wars action figures I'd gotten over the years just through him. But I had a cousin named Justin. I still have him. He and I, we both have younger sisters, so he and I just grew up like brothers, and just the memories that we had those first 6 years. So siblings. Okay, am I going all right? In fact, I'm just kind of. I don't want to get out of rhythm here, but I have a half brother. Okay. That I found out about my freshman year in high school. Okay. That was a crazy story. I had my dad and his mom had conceived my brother. Yeah. And because of my dad's situation, his mom was like, hey, just don't come around. So my dad honored that. Yeah. So I had a girlfriend my freshman year who was a junior, which is, my friends still kind of hate me for that because I was this younger guy dating an older cheerleader.
Yeah, that's good.
It makes for a good story today. But she came to me one day after a class change, and she goes, hey, this new guy from that came here from Jessamine County, Chad, he said his dad's name is Burt Ray. Like, isn't that your dad's name? I'm like, yeah. She goes, well, do you think there's two Burt Rays?
Like a Maury Povich moment for
you
man, right there in school.
Oh, I was going to say Ricky Lake. Absolutely.
Ricky Lake,
right
there. Absolutely.
So I said, there's no chance, but man, my wheels were turning. Sure. It's like, this is something I just don't know about. So I go home. My mom was I think my mom was working at the time, but I called her and it's like, hey, this is what I just heard today at school. And my mom, it wasn't like one of those maniacal laughs, but it was enough of a laugh where, and she just said, just call your dad. I'm like, oh gosh. So I called my dad, and my dad was speechless. Yeah. And
you already knew the answer.
Yeah. So that Friday night, so let's say that was on a Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Friday night, we had a home football game. I'm a freshman. I'm dressing, but I'm not on the field. Sure. And I introduced my dad to his son, who he had never met.
Dude, how crazy.
Dude. But it's just interesting. So my brother, he's my brother. Mm-hmm. So he and I have, we were really, really close when I was still in high school because he was still around. He's 2 years older than me. Yeah. And then as life does, man, we kind of, it just things just change and just paths go different directions.
Sure. Right.
But we reconnected probably 7 or 8 years ago, and then we've just had it's like one of those situations where our paths are still just, we kind of go different directions. But we have this really cool bond through Jesus.
Yeah, that's neat.
He's an amazing guy. He is, I say, in a lot of ways. My dad was one of those guys that could do anything. Dad could roof. He could change an engine. He can rebuild a carburetor. He can plumb. He can do electricity. Sure. My brother is just such a talented guy, man. I mean, he can do anything. And then, also like with my dad, let's see. Dad, we lost Dad 6 years ago.
Okay.
And, my dad was one of those guys that if he saw that you had a need, I mean, he would take the shirt off of his back. Now, it wouldn't do much good for me and you, considering how small he was.
That's right. That's right.
Use it as some kind of, some kind of an apron or some kind of, but, I mean, he would give people the last dollar in his pocket. Yeah, the stories that my brother and I got to hear in the receiving line was, Dad liked to cook, and he cooked for so many people. And of course, one of the great joys that I feel like people in this part of the country, at least in Lexington area, I won't say this part of the country, but in the Lexington area, don't really have a real understanding of is fried bologna or smoked bologna.
It's good,
dude. It's so good. So Bert would go down to the Save-A-Lot there in Stanford or wherever, and he'd get a big chub of bologna and he would smoke it. And he had these Burt beans, which is my mom's mom, so my grand's recipe, and he'd make a big batch of Burt beans and a loaf of bread. Yeah. Where he had the money to do that, I don't know, but he would go and just take it to people.
Yeah, that's neat.
So my brother, that's one of his rhythms. He just loves to do things for people, loves to help people. I love to cook for people. I mean, I love to cook for people. So
let me ask you this then. So, so much in your story, and what happens usually when I sit across from people who have stories like yours, they're pretty angry. They're displaced. They feel overwhelmed. They feel like they're always performing because they feel like they never were enough. I mean, you've got adoption in your story. You've got parents who were trying to figure stuff out that had lots of generational stuff that was just infused into them, and then it was infused into you. 8 marriages between them. And so, how did God? And maybe it's like 3 things, man. What are like 3 things that you could, because your heart's different, your perspective is different. You're very positive about all this, and you don't get there unless you've walked toward the wounds. And so, what's that been like? What has God done in your story to heal you and allow you to see them this way with compassion and a lot of grace and all of that?
So. In my experience, any anger, like I said, and I hate to say,
were you angry? Like, were you angry growing up?
No,
really,
no. I don't think so. I think my sophomore year, and this was a lot of hormones. I think more than anything, I just was struggling with some stuff. But
sure.
But once again, here's what the simple answer is God.
I mean, the Lord did it, but what were some things?
But He was present. And almost looking back on every turn. So you don't have a man like Collis Ray, who is my mom's dad, my papa, in your life and not understand the faithfulness of God. I was telling Kristen this morning. I got to grow up watching, for the first 6 years of my life, I got to grow up with a man who loved and honored and served his wife and his 2 daughters just tirelessly. I got to go to a church. Our family's been at the Maple Avenue Church of Christ since 1923. So this is 102 years. A Ray has served as an elder or been at that or been a member of that church 102 years.
In Lancaster?
In Lancaster, yeah. So so anytime Papa went into church, he was a leader. He was a man of positive and good and godly influence. So there's one. Obviously, I talked about my uncle. There was 2. I got to see all the good things that my dad did.
Yeah.
And at the time, who wouldn't be just distraught about that stuff? I can remember a time, I have two or three just real vivid memories of my dad being out of sorts. Mm-hmm. And I can remember being out of sorts over that.
Yeah.
But the constant message and the consistent actions of just love, God's love was everywhere in that storm.
Yeah.
And then once again, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So the older I got, though, I felt like I was not angry, but I got a little bit more, maybe it was envious or sometimes I wish.
Sure.
It's
when you
probably,
hear other people's stories. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, even when I just got to see it. So
yeah. Like whenever Weiss talks about his dad.
Yeah.
I go, oh.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, sure. No, for certain. Well, so to that point, just several vivid things. One of my best friends growing up, his name's Doug West, was a quarterback, just this awesome farm kid, smart, just kind of a Renaissance man. And Doug's dad, Henry, and his mom, Peggy. Henry was, they're both, these, I think college. I think maybe they met at Eastern, and Henry was he was a farmer, but he was like the smartest farmer ever, and just a hard worker, and just an intentional husband, an intentional father, and then he had 3 kids, and Doug was the youngest, and I got invited to come down to their house. So Peggy, the mom, there was a Kentucky Homemakers Association. I don't know if it still exists or not. She was the 9-time winner of the Homemaker of the Year in this organization.
How about that?
So you roll down there, and it's just this farmhouse, and there's always this glass thing that had piles of cookies, or there was a cake. I mean, it was always there.
Yeah.
So I remember going down and spending the night one night with him. I was on a school night.
Yeah.
And this is after my stepdad had left my junior year, and life was chaotic then. That's a whole nother thing, because mom was in survival mode at that point.
Sure.
I was in survival mode for that matter. But I can remember that. But God let me. I got to go down there, and God just got to show me, like, dude, this could be what you could do one day. And I can remember thinking, I want to sit around my table with my family and talk. My stepdad, because of his experiences, we weren't allowed to talk at the table.
Sure.
Like, you couldn't talk while we were eating, and if you did, man, I mean, it wasn't worth it.
We get in trouble.
We learned the hard way. It just wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
So we just all sat there.
Yeah.
In silence. And so then, like if I went to spend, Sunday after church with my papaw and my gran, I mean, it was, there was this amazing meal and amazing conversation.
Sure.
And,
God always provided for you out of your deficiencies in places where, I mean, so I can see where you can go, I can see his hand in all these spots. There's a couple verses I'll just share real quick because I think it's helpful. And then I want to keep us moving towards your family. But Psalm 68, 5 and 6, it says, God is a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, is God in his holy dwelling. God sets the lonely in families. Again, you had family, but he just provided for you. And it says he leads out the prisoners with singing, but the rebellious live in a sun-scorched earth. Or Ephesians 1:5, this whole thing about adoption. Ephesians 1:5, it says, God decided in advance to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. This is what he wanted to do, and it gave him great pleasure. And I that's so important. I have an adopted daughter too, and so, when you said your parents told you God has a special plan for you, and that's what I've always told my daughter. 1 John 3:1, it says, see how very much our Father loves us, for he calls us his children. That's who we are. And so I shift a little bit toward just what you do in your own family, because you've sought God's healing. And I've said this before, we don't get to choose about our families growing up. You didn't get to choose. I didn't get to choose, but man, we can do some things to change the families that we're going to be a part of for the rest of our lives. And so here's what's interesting. Hebrews 12, 1-3, it says, therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer or author and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the Father, the throne of God. And so good godly men are always in seasons where we're throwing off anything that hinders, and trying to deal with and process the sin that so easily entangles us, so that we can run this race with perseverance. And part of that race is is our calling, and part of our calling is as a man, for not for everybody, but for most. A lot of our calling is being a husband and a dad. And so you've been married to Kristen for 19 years. You have a deep relationship with her. You have 3 really important kids that you love, that I know feel loved by you. And as I spend time at Fight Club trying to help men understand this, that the primary weight of leadership is on men. God puts it on men. Provide, protect, fight for. And so many men are not leading, not engaged, not serving, not investing. And it has a dramatic impact on the people around them. And so I want to share 2 daunting passages of Scripture that I want us to talk about. Ephesians 5:23 through 28. It's longer than that, but I just wanted to kind of extract the key thing here. It says, "For the husband is head of the wife, as Christ is head of the church." Not a popular passage today. Which of his body, which of that he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husband in everything. And then it says this: "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves himself loves his wife." Talk about, you saw lots of different examples, some good, some bad, of this. But when the Scriptures give men, husbands, dads, the primary weight of leadership, how does that feel? I mean, you squat weight all the time. That's a lot of weight to carry, right? Does it feel? It feels overwhelming, correct?
Yes, but in the best way possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you're talking about weights.
Yeah.
We talk about with our young people. Kristen and I get to mentor so many young people, and I've officiated 21 weddings for
That's
former
awesome.
students.
Yeah.
And we talk to these young people because of my strength coaching background, and most of these people have been in my weight room. Yeah. Working up to a 500-pound squat is not as simple as you just show up and you start putting the weight on and you do it.
Yeah.
There's a process.
Yeah.
And you just add a little bit each time, but you know that the weight of the challenge is tremendous. But the growth to get there, it's just a journey. It's a destination.
Yeah.
I had no idea of the weight.
Yeah.
I had a concept of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. So let's go back to everything just briefly with like what I saw growing up.
Yeah.
I can remember a time in high school that I verbally said, and I thought this a lot after I verbally said it, if I can just be a good dad, not a godly dad, our husband, and a godly dad, there's a lot of stuff that's just going to kind of take care of itself.
Yeah.
So that's what I saw my papaw do.
Yeah.
It's what I saw a whole lot of men in the Maple Avenue Church of Christ do.
Yeah.
You're talking about coming alongside people. I had a mentor named Rusty Clark who, well, I'll talk about him probably in some detail in a bit, but I got to see him like firsthand, up close, newlywed guy that was trying to figure it out. See him just taking notes and how to do things and how not to do things. When I got to LCA, oh my goodness, brother, the amount of note taking that I took on what it was to be a godly husband and a godly father. I took a fair amount of notes on what I don't want to do and what I hope we don't want to do.
Correct.
There is some kind of weird trick that Satan plays in the minds and hearts of the men in our church about the responsibility and the role.
Yeah.
It's the greatest thing you'll ever do.
It's the best. It's hard, but it's worth it.
It's worth
the best thing ever.
So you're looking at this whole. So first of all, you've got this plot of land that you got to plow up, and you plow it up.
Yeah.
And you've got in the process of raising tobacco, you've got tobacco beds. So these little seeds, man, they are little tiny guys. I mean, smaller than BBs, tiny guys.
Yeah.
And you are going to go and you've got to just literally this it has to be a perfect patch and just kill everything off. There's a whole process that goes with it, and just especially when you're doing it like the way that we did it, because we did kind of old school.
Yeah.
And then from there, you plant these little tiny BBs, and at some point at the end of the year, there are these dried tobacco leaves that you're putting into a bale to take to the market. Well, that whole process, bro, that is a long, painstaking process that requires backbreaking work, grown man effort. Yeah. And it's just what you do, because if you're doing it, you're going to do it well.
Right.
And there's all these risks and all these things. So it's like, for me, it's like I kind of look at marriage like that a little bit. Yeah. It's like it's just this cool opportunity that God has given me to partner with someone so much better than me. Good Lord, how in the world? I mean, talking about just raising the bar of expectations, you know. Yeah. But I love it. I love it, and it's hard. Right. But anything worth doing, getting that squat number, that max number, watching that crop grow, all those things are just. It's like, and it was like this saying. It's like if it's basically if it's not hard, if it's not hard work, then it's probably not worth doing.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
And so
are there a couple of things that you and Kristen have done along the way in 19 years? Just key things that you have really just sharpened your relationship, deepened your intimacy. Yeah. Some things that you do for her.
So Scott, I'd like to think about it in this terms of we fail forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you look at our setup, and we try so hard with these young mentees. Yeah. When we're together with these mentees, we will generally talk about all the ways that we have just failed miserably and learn from it. Yeah. Because I don't want them, nor do I want my children.
Yeah. The bar is so high, you can never get it.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's once again, it's a lie. So we dispel that myth. We struggle with the same things that you're going to struggle with. Yeah. Thus, we need you to keep coming back. Yeah. And what we have seen is, so the two things, grace, and we've been able to just talk about things. Yeah. So I don't like conflict.
Gotcha.
My wife is not scared of it. And she will jump right into the middle of it. I got to process. Yeah. Because I grew up in an environment where when people fight, somebody leaves. Sometimes maybe permanently. Right. When people fight, they say things that they wish they wouldn't have said, and that maybe they regret, but can't take it back.
Yep, that's right.
Can't take it back. So at some point, as a grown person, I try to help my kids with this. Like I have had an issue with saying things that I wish I hadn't said. Sure. So now, especially when it comes to Kristen, sometimes it's better for me not to just say what I'm thinking. So I don't. Yeah. So then we get into this awkwardness of, and it took us a while to work through this, but like, I want to work this out. Well, I do too, to some extent, but it's got to be in my time.
I'm gonna need a minute.
Give me a minute.
The process, so I don't say something stupid.
Yeah, but
which is wise.
Yeah, well, yeah. So we've gotten that, but grace. I think Kristen and I respect each other. Mm-hmm. So we're just talking about just even this Ephesians 5. So we had a foster son named Jamari. Yeah, and Jamari is now the son of Jason and Maria Kerner.
I know.
And it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that story is probably another podcast, another day.
What a beautiful story, yeah.
But with that whole process, Kristen and I ended up kind of maybe hearing something different from God. Yeah. She was trusting and knew that we're supposed to adopt this little boy. Yeah. And that's not what I was hearing. Yeah. And we came to a crossroads. And I remember being in our kitchen, and I was struggling to say what I needed to say because I was scared because I didn't want her to leave me.
Right. Yeah.
We've been married for 16 years.
Yeah, she's not going anywhere.
She's not.
Still.
But because of
it's a big deal.
What I saw, what we were trying to decide, but what I had seen. So talking about the hurt or the pain. Yeah. So I just tell her, it's like, hey, this is what I'm scared of. Yeah. And then it's like, well, finally you've said it. She just said, I know who you serve and who you follow,
Yeah.
And because of that, I submit to your leadership.
Yeah.
So talking about weight.
Yeah.
I never felt weight like that before in my life. Not when we had kids.
Yeah.
Not when we got married. Mm-hmm. For her words of affirmation, for her to say that in that moment, I felt like the weight of the world in the best way possible. Sure. And I tell people this. My wife is brilliant. She's driven. She's funny. She's athletic. She's beautiful. She's just awesome to be around. She's friends to people. She's just all these things. A woman like her does not say that to somebody who is not worthy.
Suffer fools, right?
Yeah. Sure. So here's this, like one of the messages to men.
Yeah.
Be worthy of following.
Yeah.
Don't walk around with some kind of entitled thing that
love,
this is
invest, put the other first.
Yeah. Or that this is my title.
Right.
Biblically, this is what it says. You need to do that. Well, but if you haven't submitted to God, how is anyone ever supposed to follow you? How are your kids supposed to follow you? So So we serve. I mean, we serve at church. She has her own her ministry, and I actually had done prayer team for a while. I loved prayer team. It was fun.
Yeah.
I do security team, and then once again, we serve as many people as we possibly can.
Yeah.
First our marriage, and then our children.
Yeah. With your kiddos, talk about again. You didn't receive what it is that you're giving to your three, and so what are some things that you've done? I mean, there's a quick passage here, Ephesians 6:4. Fathers, don't exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. And this, it's not just dad's job. It's mom and dad's job. And the gravity of this is that we have to do what we can to lay a foundation so that our kids will find and follow Jesus. And we want them to love God and love people and eventually leave home. And so, but Paul gives them really specific instructions saying don't exasperate your kids, and don't crush them, don't break them, don't alienate them from you as a father, and don't alienate them from God the Father with our words and our actions. Instead, bring them up in the training instruction, Lord. You're a coach by nature, and so what are some things that you guys have done along the way? I mean, you're in the throes of it. 14, 12, and 10. These are hard seasons where middle school, I mean, those things are hard, man. In high school, early high school, those things are pretty hard. So talk about some things that you guys have done along the way, Brian.
Well, I look back at, I think one of the bigger differences is just stability. Mm-hmm. Stability is such a huge thing. We saw that with Jamari. Jamari had no stability for the first 5 years of his life. I'm the first man that's in his life.
Consistent.
Every day he comes home, I'm there. Every night he goes to bed, I'm there. When he wakes up, I'm there. I'm just there. Yeah. Jason has now been there with him. I think they're on maybe going into 2 years that they've actually had him under roof, but they got to adopt him this last summer.
Yeah.
Jason's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing
something about our stability.
It's stability. Yeah. It's just the power of presence, which I could talk all day about that, but they were, that's just what my kids have right now. The best. It's so funny. So Lexington Christian Academy and my strength coaching job over there that God oriented, orchestrated, and opened up for me taught me more about parenting because I was in this laboratory of watching parents just trying to figure it out. Right. So I can remember I have had so many conversations with the kids that I feel like were the best kids, especially when I started having girls. I saw a young person and I'd go, hey, tell me about your mom and dad.
Yeah.
Tell me about their relationship.
Yeah, asking good questions. Yeah.
And they would tell me about their dad. And this is just, once again, not any kind of scientific research, but it's dad was always present.
Yeah.
Dad was generally always intentional, but even if he wasn't intentional, he was always present. Yeah. He was there. Yeah. There was some type of nurturing that he was doing very well with the mother. Yeah. There was some type of nurturing. He was being very intentional with his daughters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't tell you how many amazing dads that I got to be around. So that was one huge thing that's been a blessing for our kids.
Yeah.
Like I said, my parents loved me. My family loved me. Everybody did the very best that they could. I said a grandparent can only do so much, right?
You're right.
But like for us to see the value of just being intentional. So here's a fun story. We B. Fry, I think, was the one that had kind of talked to us about this, and I think this is the first parent that I had ever met. Yeah, got our church.
Yeah.
He did a trip with his kids.
Okay.
So I had worked with his oldest son, who was when he was in junior high, and this is about the time that he was getting ready to go on this trip with his dad. So I'm just thinking, well, I want to do a trip with my kids someday. That sounds like awesome. Mm-hmm. So Kristen and I talk about it. Kristen does a 10-year-old trip. And it's just fun.
Yeah.
So Eliza Jane went to Harry Potter World.
Yeah.
Lucy went to Anaheim to Disneyland.
Yeah.
And then she just took Samson to Oregon.
Gotcha.
They just went on an adventure out there.
Very cool.
I have the 13-year-old trip.
Yeah.
So this is where we will invite our daughters and one day our son we invite them out of being a little girl into womanhood.
Rite of passage.
Yeah.
That's
so
good,
it's a rite of passage. So we got to go, took them to Annapolis, Maryland, which is just this amazing place with lots of food. My daughter, my oldest, has an interest possibly in going to Naval Academy to play soccer.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We sat down and I told her the purpose of the trip, and we talked about where we're from. So we got in Luke chapter 3, and we read the genealogy, and she read it.
Yeah.
Read the genealogy from Jesus back to Adam.
Yeah.
And I said, so this is our adopted family. This is what we identify with. This is the importance of who we are.
Yeah, that's good.
And directs our path.
The genealogy of Jesus is our adoptive genealogy.
Exactly.
That's right. That's good.
Yeah, that's it. So then I drew out the old family tree that comes together.
Then you talked to
So I made her physically write in each name.
Yeah.
And I got to tell a story about what I knew. So my papaw, who's 93, has stories about his granddad, which is Eliza Jane's fourth or fifth grandfather. And I got to talk to her about the characteristics of him and what he valued and what he thought was important.
See this stuff being passed
Dude,
down.
that's it, man. That's
Passed
it.
down. Yeah.
So we talked about the importance of being a Ray. What does it mean to be a Ray?
Yeah.
Love God, man. Just love your family. Love people. Hard work.
Sure.
Just taking care of others. I mean, just this. So we had that, and then we spent the rest of the week.
It's so good, man.
But we created an ethos for her.
Sure.
So I wanted her to come up with some type of just ethos that she could go back to when things are a little out of whack. And I said, and it's open to be changed. Change anytime you need to.
Yeah.
Adjust as you need to, depending on your seasonal life. But
I love that, buddy.
yeah, so it's things like that, Scott. It's just, are we present? Absolutely. Are Kristen and I pursuing Jesus? Absolutely. Are we doing our very best to model marriage and relationships and nurturing each other and respecting each other? Absolutely. And I think all those things, our love for Christ, the overflow of that then flows into our marriage.
Yeah.
The overflow of our marriage flows into our kids.
Yeah.
And then our kids, who knows where they're going to end up going. But right now, you take a snapshot.
Yeah.
Praise Jesus for the path that they're on and the affirmation that we receive, not only from others, but from them.
Right. That's good, man. That's really, really good. I love that. At some point, this rite of passage thing, I'm on it right now. I'm trying to figure out some things for our church. So, because you just don't see it anywhere. You don't see it anywhere. And so I've been studying. There's a couple books I've been looking at. I've got a buddy of mine that's actually walking through something with his son right now. And I'm actually talking to a church even in Maryland where they've got a couple guys that have been doing some things. So this is I love that, man. That's so cool. Let's talk about discipleship and mentoring. Okay, this is big, and we've probably got about a 15-minute window. We got to probably keep it tight. But so Jesus gives the disciples the Great Commission in Matthew 28. He says, "All authority in heaven and on earth have been given to me. Therefore, I want you to go and I want you to make disciples." of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. Surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. And so he looks at these 11 guys after he's resurrected from the grave and says, hey, I want you to go. All this stuff that I've given you, I want you to go. I want you to make disciples of all nations, which means there's evangelism, there's discipleship that's inside of that as we make disciples. But he didn't just command them, he commanded us to do the same thing. And so here's what this looks like. We want to be people that are disciples, that make disciples who make disciples. And so we're not just trying to give something away for somebody to hold on to. We're just constantly giving something away that somebody will continue to give away to other people. And the Bible gives us clarity. We're supposed to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow him. A disciple is someone who is a followed or committed student of their teacher. And locker room, you know this, when Jesus becomes our Lord and our King, he becomes our teacher. And our aim is to learn from him, listen to him, become like him. And so a big part of our job as a disciple is to help people find and follow Jesus. And so it's a high challenge. And our job to help people is to find ways to pour into people's lives. That's discipleship. To share with them what God's taught us. And then another job for us as men is how do we encourage, be an example to, and help other men, and that's mentoring. And so Jesus did this with 12 disciples. Paul did this with Timothy and Titus. He did this with other men. The scriptures tell us that Paul was a spiritual father to so many. 1 Corinthians 4:15 talks about this. Timothy was raised by his mother and grandmother, and Paul says that Timothy became his son in the faith. And so there's so many things around this. You know, Matthew 10:8 says, freely you have received, freely give. Paul tells Timothy this in 2 Timothy 2:1-2. Timothy, my dear son, be strong through the grace that God gives you in Christ Jesus. You have heard me teach things that have been confirmed by many reliable witnesses. Now teach these truths to other trustworthy people who will pass them on to others. Again, disciples who make disciples who make disciples. This is mentoring and discipleship. 1 Thessalonians 5:11. Therefore, encourage each other and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. Jesus said this in John 13:34-35. A new command I give you: love one another. As I've loved you, you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples. There's not a great man that's built in isolation. There's just not. Strong, godly men are forged in healthy relationships through mentoring, through discipleship, and so this is something that you received along the way from a multitude of people. It wasn't one person, but if you think about mentoring and discipleship, you go Christ-like character, biblical worldview, imparted godly wisdom, motivated you toward kingdom impact, and not ever growing weary of doing good, being resilient. And so what were some things, some people along the way that have done some of that in you? Because again, your story is, you don't look like the person that you grew up as. You don't. And so, it's been because of people. And so what's been some of the practices and some of the people, what were some of the things that they did to disciple you and mentor you?
So, man, this is a lot.
I know it's a lot of people, right? It is.
So, family-wise, obviously I think about my papaw, who I watched him disciple people.
Yeah.
Then I think about the whole church, all the people that were there. Rusty Clark, who I mentioned earlier, the power of presence and the fact that he was a new believer.
Yeah.
So that helped me to understand that I don't have to have all the answers. I just have to be available. And we work together most every day in the summer, grown man labor, shoulder to shoulder kind of stuff.
As you were growing up,
This is junior high school. So those impressionable ages. I was a new believer.
Yeah.
He was baptized in March of '87. I was baptized in August of '87.
Which is cool. He's very close to you in spiritual ages, but he still went, I'm going to pour into you. And you receive from him.
And he was just present. So quickly, I think about the men I have in my life. I got a guy named Craig who has mentored me for the last 18 years. I've got Kurt. I've got Dave. I got a guy named John. John was just one of these, just all these pieces. I have so many OGs.
Yep.
So the OGs, in the context of the life of Paul, I have Barnabas. And Barnabas was just that guy that just was the older man in Paul's life, that just the teacher, maybe the discipler, the encourager.
Yep.
And I have an abundance, like to the point to where, as I'm saying this, I'm almost embarrassed
about
how many people.
Yeah.
But I'm also someone who desires it.
Yep.
So my word to the church, to the men in our congregation,
Desire it.
if you desire it,
Yep.
then you need to look at someone. And this is as simple as it is. It's simple but not easy. Mm-hmm. Who is someone in your sphere? Because there's somebody in your sphere.
It's huge. Yeah.
That is doing things like you wish you wanted to do.
That's right.
I said Henry West. There was another, and that'd be one of the guys. Go and talk to that guy because here's what I know. Got a couple guys here named Ernie and Sherman.
Yeah.
Just pillars of faithfulness in this congregation.
Absolutely.
And I got a chance, an opportunity to serve as an active elder for 3 years. Both of those men were on at that time. Yeah. And all I wanted to do was talk to those guys because they just had such great encouragement, and they were. Sherman, it's very specifically, so if you have a desire, then act on it. Be obedient. Take the fear and the lies of Satan.
Just humble yourself and ask. Yeah.
Just ask, because my experience says that there is an older man in our building that just wants to pour into somebody.
Absolutely. We cannot, if we don't go toward them, and listen, older guys, you got to look around for younger guys too, and be intentional that way. If you see somebody, you go, they might be in trouble, move toward them. Mm-hmm. If God gives you clarity about moving toward them, move toward them and just dump out what you have. If you're a younger guy younger guy could be younger just in faith, or I'm new to this, or I'm trying to figure out what it means to be a man now, because, and I'm 40 years old, I've got plenty of guys that do that. But if they will put themselves around good, godly people, and they'll just ask good questions and be intentional and be willing to soak up from them and just learn and listen and be humble, man, it's life-changing, right?
So then we go to the Silases of our life, and I have an abundance of those. Yeah. I have men in my life that maybe don't have the same values that I have or the same convictions I have. I still love those folks, but the people that I have that recharge me, that point me to Christ, though I have daily interaction with those people. Yeah. And I don't always do life with those people. I got kind of an interesting thing where so I have that. You have to have a Silas. You have to have someone in your life that will just tell you truth, that has kind of maybe the same season of life that you're in. Yeah. The young Timothys. So going back to age, I had 400 and something students at LCA, eyes on me, that I'm either going to live out what I'm saying or I'm a phony, and there's nothing like younger people who can call out the phony like no other.
Yeah, it smells.
I have this opportunity to be a chaplain in Scott County Sheriff's Office. Yeah. I have seven. Yeah. I have 7 deputies that I think they're all younger than me too, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so they're truly the whole they can fit the young Timothy thing. Yeah. But I get to be available for them. Yeah. And there's John McIntosh was a gentleman that has mentored me in the past, and he's a member of our church, and he had just said, it's great to be mentored. Bro, what you learn when you take on a younger believer or a newer believer, the things that you will learn about yourself and about Jesus, the things those kids taught me at LCA, and I've said this, I'll say it publicly, I've said it to them. My students at LCA taught me more about being a believer, being a husband, being a father, being a friend than I've ever learned in any other season of life. If you don't have, and I think as we want to grow into being men of faith, to being these type of leaders that we just pray that the church will continue to produce. Yeah. Like you said, it's not in isolation. I think you've got to have a little bit of all those. And if you don't have all 3, that's okay.
Start where you start.
But you said humility. Yeah. You got to set that aside. Yeah. Fear. Yeah. You got to set that aside. So
don't be afraid to ask these questions.
That's it, man.
Whatever the questions are. Yeah, absolutely.
Because pride and fear come from one source. Yeah. It's only one source.
That's it.
It's Satan.
That's it.
So you're either going to buy into his lies or you're going to buy into the truth that I'm talking about, that I'm living proof that God is faithful, God is able, if we just let him.
Yes. Ephesians 5:1-2 says, imitate God, therefore, in everything you do, because you are his dear children. Live a life filled with his love. Follow the example of Christ. He loved us and offered himself as a sacrifice for us, a pleasing aroma to God, which means, hey, our job is to follow him. And then Paul also says, to the church in Corinth, he says, follow my example as I follow the example of Jesus. And we know this about Paul. There's some amazing things about Paul, but he also had some struggles, quite a few. And so, and he didn't just like just focus on the things that he did well. He talks about his struggles throughout Scripture. Romans 7 is big. There's a time where he's got a thorn that, again, this metaphorical thorn that he's asking the Lord to remove in 3 seasons of his life, and Jesus goes, I'm not removing it, Paul. My grace is going to be sufficient. My power is going to be made perfect in your weakness. And so Paul shows us, hey, I'm the worst of sinners. He's yet he's still an example and a spiritual father, and he's mentoring, discipling guys. And so too many guys get locked up in going, I don't know if I can be a mentor, because mentor's a big word, or a leader, or a small group leader. And it's like, hey, you don't have to be perfect. We have a perfect example in Jesus that we're all trying to follow. If we'll imitate him, and then as we're imitating him, we're calling people to imitate us in our faith as we do it. What are some things, just thoughts around kind of that mindset? Because there's plenty of guys that go, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I'm supposed to mentor. Feels weird. I don't have everything figured out. I can't preach sermons. I'm not sure that I can even pray out. I mean, there's so many things that kind of get in the way. The enemy wants to push them down, because if he pushes down a mentor or someone who can disciple people, it impacts so many people. So talk about that.
Everybody has a story or an example in their life where somebody has touched their lives.
Yeah.
And if you were to go back and talk to that person, there was not any Herculean effort or this whole, you know what, I've got this checklist, and if I don't have all these boxes checked, then I can't do it.
Yeah.
It's the power of being present. So I'm at home, and I'll make this as brief as I can. I'm at home on getting ready to take Samson to a baseball game. I get a call from one of our lieutenants. Mm-hmm. He said, "Where are you?" And I could hear sirens in the background. Yeah. And I said, "I'm at home, because I need you to get down to the emergency room." Yeah. Said, one of our guys has been shot, and it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
So call my wife, and I'm got to get kids taken care of and get them squared away. I said, you've got to handle all this stuff. I'm going to get Samson dropped off. Yeah. I call Keith Galloway, because that's my Silas when things are just really, really tough. Yeah. I call him, so he prayed. Yeah. I called Weiss, and Weiss gave me some practical advice, because I've never done anything like this.
Into a hard situation.
And roll in there, and in that moment, as long as I've been doing ministry, as long as I've been available for people, I had no clue.
Yeah.
It was brand new.
Yeah.
And all the circumstances were awful. So the deputy died. The murderer has been sentenced to life in prison without parole. Yeah. And here are these alphas, all these alpha dogs, man, this just distraught and angry and emotional. So in that moment, I didn't have anything figured out. Yeah. I didn't have a checklist.
Yeah.
I just showed up.
Yeah.
And I just loved and hugged on people.
Yeah.
I love you, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I let God do the rest.
Yeah.
So, man, if you're listening to this and you're just struggling with what to do and you don't know what to do, there's somebody out there. I would say that everything that we do and everything that we say, it matters to somebody.
Correct.
Be present. Love people. Everybody can love people. Yeah. Hugs are some of the most simple way to just be a conduit for the love of Jesus Christ. Just show up. Yeah. And just let God be God.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. Scott, that's what it is with parenting. That's it for being married.
I know, man. Yeah.
Everybody's just checked out over here and doing their own thing, and I'm just consumed. All your wife wants you to be, bro, is present. All your kids want you to be is present.
Yeah. Yeah, be willing to go there. And again, whether you're a mentor for one of our schools, or you serve in student ministries, or young adults, or you are leading a men's group at church, or you're in chaplaincy, whatever that looks like, 90% of showing up and just being available and going, God, how can you use me? And you don't have to have all the answers. In fact, most of the time in mentoring and discipling is even talking about your pain and what you've been through and how God's rescued you, and even what you're currently working on. I think that's so important, because it's not just about, hey, these are all the ways that we're killing it. Emulate me. Look how awesome I am. It's not. It comes from, these are the things that I've learned, that I'm working on, that have been really effective in our family and in my marriage. But man, to lie to them and go, hey, it's been awesome just up and to the right from the jump. It's like, nobody. And And I sat with a guy that's been married for 18 months this past weekend at our church, and they're going through it, and it's like, hey bud, I'm just going to tell you, I love you, and I still struggle with things, but you're going to have to lean in, and you're going to have to own some stuff, and you don't get to quit.
Yeah.
This is hard, but what's hard is quitting.
Mm-hmm.
And God needs you to step up. God needs you to move back in and serve your wife and stop dying on dumb hills. Because you can't build anything on these hills that we try to die on. You can't build anything. And so last thing, just as we're wrapping up, man, we talked about so many different things. Your backstory, the intentional stuff with your family, the stuff that you do to disciple and minister to people. I love the fact that you've done so many different weddings, and you've just used the circles that God's put you in. I mean, from your work to what you did growing up, or vocational stuff, or different ways that you served. There's been all these circles that you just used relationally to make yourself available. But is there anything, just as you're thinking about, I'd love to just encourage guys this way, and it doesn't matter what it is, or a story to wrap us up. Just encouragement.
I think that the availability part, one of the things that and this is more recently than not, we always has said from stage, do for the few that you wish you could do for the many.
Yeah.
And there are so many ways that Satan tries to come in and overcomplicate things.
Correct.
It's just like if it hasn't,
or the church makes it hard, and we don't have to.
Yeah, if it hasn't been run through a committee, there's no way that we could possibly do it.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
So I think to simplify things. So if it's simply at home, let's just start there, because that's the foundation of it.
Yeah.
If you're a married person and you are not in the rhythm of expressing gratitude to your wife, just start with find something that you're grateful for your wife, and express it to her.
Let her know
in a heartfelt way.
Yeah.
If you're not being intentional with your kids, it may be just as simple as, hey, let's go get some let's go get some ice cream. Let's go for a ride.
Yeah.
Just some way to be intentional with your kids. The more simple, the better.
Correct.
It doesn't have to be complex.
Right.
I think too, it's just, once again, sometimes just saying no to some of the stuff that just gets in our way.
Yeah.
So we have to guard our margins, because I'd say yes to everything, and that's probably been the hardest thing that I've had to do is just.
You want to help people.
Yeah. That's all I want to do. But sometimes I've found that and it's the hard way. I have a few people right now that I'm truly just getting to pour into.
Yeah.
And
can't do everything.
Yeah, but it's been life-changing for me.
Yeah.
So I'm going back to some of the stuff too that we had talked about before, just about the past. I felt like that God gave me a coping mechanism of, if I can just pour myself into others, whatever the disappointment may be, whatever the thing, it's like with I have a little sister that I didn't get to really have good relationship with, because at 13 she started down this destructive path, and then plus I went off to school.
Yeah, right.
So when I've been coaching over at school, and I've got all these young female athletes, because I had both men and women,
right.
I can remember, and I've got 3 or 4 right now that I'm still incredibly close to.
Yeah.
And my wife, bless her heart, because of our integrity and because of just the nature of our relationship, it's just been this healthy thing, because she has a great relationship with them also.
She's involved too. Yeah.
That has been a way to almost kind of soothe the disappointment and pain that I had that I didn't get to do with my sister.
God heals us when we help others.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I think there's, if you don't know what to do with your pain and your anger, find someone to help.
Yeah.
Find someone to love, man, and to serve.
That's money.
Yep.
That's money. Buddy, I love it. And we'll do this again, I'm sure. But grateful for your story. Love what God's doing in your life. I wish there were 1 million of you at all 5 of our campuses, but that's what we're working on. Build culture of godly men that serve and love people well, that just are available, that follow up, that check on people, that are willing to go push past the awkward to go love people really, really well. So thanks for jumping on today, man. It's awesome. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, if this podcast has encouraged you, I'd love to hear from you. If you're wrestling with Christianity, would like to become a Christ follower, interested in being baptized, or just need help figuring out your next step, shoot us an email at lockerroom@southland.church. I'm happy to connect with you. I'm happy to connect you with Brian if that's helpful. We'd be happy to help you in any way that we can. If this podcast has encouraged you, share it with a friend. You never know how an episode like this will help those in your life that you care about. And men, I promise you, if you're walking with Jesus, if you'll take some steps here, God will put you in positions and make you available to be able to pour into people and make your life count, make your lives count. And we can just keep building culture of godly men that continue just to take good ground for the kingdom. God, Locker Room, I love you. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. Have a good one.